This video is sponsored by the Association of Anaesthetists, A-Line, Health Education Northeast and NEMO.
Dr. Julia Siddall is she's a consultant obstetric anaesthetist at Royal Victoria Infirmary at Newcastle upon Tyne. Julia has been a deputy college tutor for 8 years and deputy regional advisor, and she's been committed to trainees having the best quality training and training experience in our region. She also implemented effective and innovative anti-bullying and anti-racist program while she was a deputy regional advisor, and also has lectured, taught and trained on maternal mortality reduction in several diverse countries such as Liberia, West Bank and Republic of Georgia. Thank you very much, Julia.
Thank you. It's my immense privilege to be asked to speak today at this course, and I'm very grateful to my excellent previous presenters who've introduced some of the difficult topics that I'm going to talk about in the next 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk about referral to the General Medical Council, and I'm very proud to present on this opening slide my General Medical Council number, because I am fully registered with the GMC and free to practice with no restrictions. However, this is a photograph of me awaiting my MPTS tribunal verdict at the GMC previously. So I have been through this process myself. I had the misfortune to develop a serious life-threatening mental health problem 3 years ago, and in the process of prosecuting ending my own life, I committed a serious criminal offence. So I'll just leave that there and move on. So it's a massive topic, so I can only really talk to you today in headlines. And I'm going to talk about avoiding referral. What are your chances in the context of being from a different ethnic group, or just being female as opposed to male, and reasons for referral and strategies to use if you do get referred. So have you read this book? I suggest you do, because it contains all the rules you need to abide by to be a good doctor and avoid being referred to the General Medical Council. I'm not going to go into the actual process of referral, but I would very strongly recommend looking at this summary by a medical barrister in this field, because it explains it very well. So the theme of the day is levelling the field, and it's certainly not a level field. You know, we've got that out there already this morning. And, you know, how might you get referred to the General Medical Council? Well, you could get referred by the public, you know, by patients. You may get referred by your employer for various different reasons. You may get referred by an outside agency, such as police or social care, and you can refer yourself. And if we have the hearing outcome, just to stretch the analogy, at the top end, at the steepest bit of the pitch, where you land on this pitch and your process through your referral to the GMC can be very much improved if you refer yourself. And one of my previous speakers has mentioned how it's part of your duty of candor if you're involved in anything such as a coroner's inquest, or you're arrested, this sort of thing, to show that you have insight into the situation you're in if you refer yourself to the General Medical Council. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So let's get down to the bones of it. This is some data from the actual General Medical Council, which breaks down the number of people who were referred to the GMC in the time period 2016 to 2018. And ostensibly, if we look at the first circle, the percentage of people complained about, really, essentially, it's just over 1 in 10 doctors on the register. So we're looking at all doctors, GPs, specialist consultants, and trainees. However, this 10% does not speak completely of what's going on, because I'd like to put forward a concept of your medical social capital. And if you come to this country as a newly to work in this country, you have sort of zero medical social capital. Whereas if you're well established, you're white, you qualified in this country from what's considered a good university, you work in a good hospital, you have pretty high value medical social capital. So your 11% of doctors who are white and qualified in the UK is probably a gross underrepresentation of those who could be referred. It's just those who are referred. If we move over to the second circle, this shows the number of complaints which go on to be investigated. And this is where the numbers start diversifying, but not in a good way. So if you're from an ethnic minority and you qualified in the UK, you are slightly more likely to have your complaint investigated. However, if your primary medical qualification is outside of the UK and you are from an ethnic minority group for the UK, you're much more likely for your complaint to get investigated, and you're more likely to get a sanction or erasure. So looking at it simplistically, there are more complaints investigated if you're from a minority group with harsher outcomes. Now, this has not gone unnoticed by the powers that be, quite rightly. So there was a report which was published recently called Fair to Refer, looking at who gets referred, why, and what are the problems. So what this does from the GMC point of view is it steps it back. It says that you're more likely to get referred by an employer if you're in a minority group or qualified outside the UK, and therefore the severity and veracity of the complaint is greater, so you're more likely to get sanctioned. What were the conclusions of the report? Well, before we start, Claire Marks, chairman of the GMC, says in her press release commenting on the report that, you know, racism and other forms of discrimination are rife within medicine, but stops short of saying that there's any problem at the GMC. There may or may not be. So as some of my previous speakers have mentioned, inadequate feedback. You may have gone to work in a hospital which is not working very well in itself, and therefore has been unable to recruit UK graduates to its establishment, and your induction may be poor, and you may not be inducted into the NHS or living in Britain, as the first speaker very eloquently described. And we know that despite all the work to look at the complexities of medical error, that there is still very much a blame culture, and it's much easier to pick on the outsider and blame them for the systemic failings which have led to a medical error. And again, as one of my other speakers has mentioned, there are in and out groups. This is the language of the report, based on qualification and ethnicity. And within those in and out groups, there is, again, as the professor mentioned, bias, both conscious and unconscious bias. Now, in the UK, you have law which allows you not to be discriminated on regarding your protected features, such as your race, ethnicity. However, as you know, the bullying and harassment talk mentioned, you know, racism and biased views are out there. One of the most uncomfortable moments of my career was when I was sitting with a senior colleague from an ethnic group, and the waiter was pouring us coffee, and that person turned around to me and said, Julia, Tamils are normally very ugly, but that man's quite good looking. And you know, beyond astonishment and uncomfortableness being in that situation. So these things exist, and by the fact that we're talking about them in this levelling the field, you know, it's part of addressing the problem. If you're in an in-group where your medical social capital is high, you will get more favourable treatment if you're involved in something that's gone wrong. And if you're in an out-group, you're more likely to be subjected to bias and stereotyping and get referred to the GMC. So the recommendations of Fair to Refer are that we need to strengthen induction, feedback and support, and provide channels for integrating people who are new to the country. Addressing the systemic issues which cause these problems, and engage in this problem, which by having this day we are doing. So what does this mean for yourself as an individual? What I would suggest is that if you work somewhere and it's not ideal and you're not having a good time, that you record what has happened. If your appraisal is delayed or is very cursory, you don't have adequate IT support, all these things, that you keep a contemporaneous record, because if you have the misfortune to be referred to the GMC, these can be used in evidence of the context within whatever occurred. So if we look back at those statistics, you know, it is quite a shock to think that, you know, if there's 500 people in this audience in a 3-4 year period, 1 in 10 of you will get referred to the General Medical Council. Now, that's almost like it will happen, but you know, when it does happen to people, it's seen as a shock, and they may or probably have not prepared for the event. Not all complaints go on to get investigated, but if you identify whether you're in an at-risk category, you may be able to do some preparation should you have the misfortune at some point in your career to be in this situation. So if you get referred to the General Medical Council, there's definitely a hierarchy of offences. Of course, the first one is the gross negligence manslaughter, and I don't have enough time and I don't want to be disrespectful to the complexities of the cases such as Baba Gawawa or any of the other people who've been accused of gross negligent manslaughter in the UK, or rather England, because the law is different in Scotland. But the big things that are looked on very poorly, because they undermine the role of a doctor to the public, are dishonesty, lying about what's happened and trying to cover up what's happened. Then up there is inappropriate sexual behaviours, either with patients, colleagues, or in the age of the internet, accessing illegal pornography or social media behaviour, and criminal acts, whether they're in your personal or professional life. There isn't really a boundary between those things, because it's most definitely that you're a doctor 24 hours a day. You may be off duty from the hospital, but you're never off duty from being a doctor itself. And theft, forgery, and obtaining drugs or misusing drugs, whether that's opioids or alcohol, are seen very poorly. Also, if something's a one-off, then that's fine. but well, it's not fine, but if there's a repeated pattern of behaviour, again, this is looked on poorly. And very, very much, I cannot emphasise this sufficiently, is if someone has lack of remorse for what's happened, lack of insight, or failed to remediate their behaviour. So I'd say the watchwords to bear in mind should you get involved in a referral to the GMC are truth, insight, and remorse for what's happened, whatever's happened. So what does it involve? A lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of pressure. It's a very adversarial legal process that looks at culpability rather than the context within which a crime or something bad has happened. It goes on for a very long time. One of the advantages of what's happened with coronavirus is that the time frame has shortened slightly, and it's very, very public. Details of certain aspects of your health will be withheld, but everything else is just out there. And in contrast to anything that's, say, on Google, there's no right to be forgotten from your MPTS outcome, which is published and shared with other international agencies. The pressure that this puts the individual on is immense. So if you didn't have a mental illness before it started, and you probably will get one when you do start get involved in this. And if you had a mental illness to start with, this will compound it immeasurably. And it impacts all areas of your life, and it will change you forever, all aspects of your life. So, what can you do to shore up your position? It's absolutely essential to be in a defence organisation. And should you get referred or feel that you may be about to get referred, consult the law early. I'd also suggest very strongly that you consult an employment solicitor separate to the medical thread of what's going on, because you may find that your employer no longer wishes to employ you because of the taint, the scandal, and the fact that they may be implicated in what has happened to you and failed in their responsibilities towards you. That's what's good about the recommendations of Fair to Refer, is it actually puts some, although they're not law, some standards out there that your employer should aspire to meet if they are employing you. You have to be prepared for the gloves being off. Your employer will probably try to stop paying you if they can. For example, if you're suspended at the interim order tribunal, or certainly at the full-blown tribunal. And it's all very, very expensive, like phenomenally expensive. So you will go from being a well-paid, well-respected person with a secure job where the money just turns up each month into relative poverty once you have made your way through any savings that you have. So I can suggest as a small practical tip that you open credit lines before those inevitable changes. And things like, if you ever wondered about ticking that extra box about legal protection on your household or your motor insurance, do that, because you never know, that could pay for your employment solicitor. Briefly looking at the legal aspects, do not under any circumstances whatsoever represent yourself. If a man came to me and said that they were going to try and give themselves their own anaesthetic, you would realise they were clearly mad and had no insight into the complexities of having an anaesthetic. So if you represent yourself, a litigant in person, what 1 in 10 people who went to the full-blown tribunal did, you're much more likely to get struck off, much more likely, and you are by definition, probably not showing any insight into what's gone on. The other thing to do is to turn up, which sounds obvious, but again, people don't turn up. Quite a sizable proportion of people don't turn up, and you're much more likely to get a bad outcome if you don't turn up. It's not over till it's over, so turn up. It is a trial, so you need to be prepared. However, the difference is, say, compared to the criminal justice system, is it's not quite as predictable as you will get if you're in the criminal justice system. And I would suggest, if you're involved in a criminal offence, take your criminal solicitor to your IOT if possible, because they are better at understanding what's gone on and the points of law that are being argued at that point. And you most definitely need a specialist medical regulatory law barrister. You will get one appointed for you if you go through a defence organisation, but if you were not in a defence organisation, then you need a very particular type to defend you. So looking at the health aspects, well, these are devastating. As I mentioned before, if you weren't ill beforehand, you will be or at risk of being at the time of going through it. But it's a lot worse than that. You know, again, a freedom of information request and work by Bourne and Peters shows that well, as an anaesthetist, you've got twice the risk of another doctor of committing suicide just in general in your lifetime. But if you get into waiting for your MPTS tribunal, there's 100 times risk of a doctor in that situation killing themselves compared to a doctor who's not in that situation. And that's shocking. Nothing is worth that. And we are absolutely obligated with a duty of care as a society to try and mitigate this risk for people. And there's very good work being done by the practitioner health programme to do just that. MPTS hearings are public, so people can come, the press will come. Myself, I made Fox News on the internet and every daily newspaper in the country apart from The Guardian. So, you know, it's a big thing, a big effect on your life. And prepare to be isolated and cut off from your normal support system. So if you're a bit isolated and a bit cut off because you just come to work in the country, or if you had massive medical social capital beforehand, that will go and you're on your own. But there is support out there and you need it. Medication, counselling, peer support, groups affiliated to your ethnic minority. And again, I can't really go into it because of the time constraints, the practitioner health programme. So in conclusion, this might happen to you. It doesn't have to be the end. The playing field is not level, and it's very, very important to remember that it's more important to be a well human being because you're a human being first and a doctor second. But with the right help, you can and will survive this process. Thank you very much.